Number 1. Megan Huntsman. Megan Huntsman lived in a quiet neighborhood in Pleasant Grove, Utah. To most people, she seemed like an ordinary suburb mom. She was married, had children, and lived in a modest home on a peaceful street. Over the course of nearly a decade, she carried out one of the most disturbing crimes in recent memory. One that would only come to light by accident, years after it began. Between 1996 and 2006, Megan secretly gave birth to 7 babies, none of which ever saw the outside world. Each time she went into labor, she made sure no one else knew. She would deliver the infants alone, often in the bathroom of her home. And shortly after giving birth, she would murder them. According to her confession, she either strangled or suffocated 6 of the newborns while one was believed to be stillborn. Then she wrapped their tiny bodies in cloth and placed them in plastic bags and hid them in a box inside a garage. Over time, those boxes collected dust while Megan continued on with her life as if nothing had happened. The truth only came out in April 2014, years after the last death. Megan had moved out of the home by then, and her estranged husband, Darren West, returned to the house to help clean out the garage. While sorting through old belongings, he opened one of the boxes and made a horrifying discovery. Inside was the body of an infant. He immediately called police, and when investigators arrived, they searched the garage and found 6 more tiny corpses, each stored the same way, wrapped up and hidden in containers. Megan was arrested the next day. During her interview with police, she confessed to killing 6 of the newborns. She explained that she had been addicted to methamphetamine for years and felt completely incapable of raising more children. She also said she kept pregnancies hidden from everyone: her husband, her family, and even her friends. Investigators confirmed that she delivered all of the babies alone and never sought any kind of medical attention. Shockingly, no one in her life had noticed the repeated pregnancies. Some later said they thought she had just gained weight. Others admitted they were used to her disappearing for stretches of time due to her drug use. In February 2015, Megan Huntsman pled guilty to 6 counts of first-degree murder. Prosecutors described her action as calculated and sustained over a 10-year period. The court didn't focus on a dramatic display or emotional pleas, just the cold facts. 6 innocent lives had been taken in secret, and Megan admitted responsibility for each one of them. One of the infants were determined to be stillborn, so no charges was filed in that case. On April 20, 2015, Megan was sentenced to 6 life terms. 3 of those terms were ordered to be served consecutively, while the other 3 would run concurrently under Utah law. That was the harshest punishment available. She wouldn't be eligible for parole until 2064, when she'll be nearly 90 years old. Number 2. Jennifer Hart. Jennifer Hart was once seen as a devoted adoptive mother raising 6 children alongside her wife, Sarah Hart. Their family, made up of 3-sibling pair adopted from foster care, had become somewhat well-known online through social media. Their posts showed smiling children, outdoor adventures, and a picture-perfect life that many admired. But behind those careful, curated images was a very different reality, one full of control, fear, and abuse. What started as a story of rescue and love ended in a horrifying tragedy that would be labeled as a deliberate act of murder. On March 26, 2018, a vehicle belonging to Jennifer Hart was found at the bottom of Rocky Cliff on the Pacific Coast Highway of Mendocino County, California. Inside the SUV were the bodies of Jennifer and Sarah Hart, as well as 3 of their adopted children. Over the following days, the remains of 2 more children were recovered nearby, and one, Devontae Hart, was never found but is presumed dead. Investigators discovered that the car had been intentionally driven off the cliff at full speed. There were no skid marks, no attempt to brake. It was a deliberate plunge, 100 feet straight down into the rocky ocean below. As police began piecing together what had happened, a much darker picture emerged. The Hart children
had been the subject of multiple reports to Children Protection Services in both Minnesota and Washington states, where the family had previously lived. Teachers, neighbors, and even strangers had made calls expressing concerns about the children's well-being. Some of the kids showed signs of malnutrition. One child had jumped out of the second-story window in the middle of the night, begging a neighbor for help, saying they were being abused. Another child, Devante, was photographed tearfully hugging a police officer at a protest, and a now famous viral image, an image later seen as a symbolic of a child desperate for love and safety. Despite the many red flags, the family had managed to stay one step ahead of investigators, often moving to new states as concerns mounted. There was no arrest in this case because Jennifer Hart, the driver, died in the crash she caused. But the investigation revealed that she had been under immense pressure. Just days before the fatal crash, Child Protective Services had knocked on the family's door in response to yet another abuse report. No one answered. The very next day, the entire Hart family packed up and left home. Toxicology reports would later show that Jennifer Hart was intoxicated behind the wheel, and Sarah Hart and some of the children had high levels of diphenhydramine, the active ingredient in Benadryl, in their systems. Authorities concluded that this was a murder suicide carried out by Jennifer with the intent to kill all 6 children and her partner. This case was not tried in a courtroom, but it went through a formal coroner's inquest in April 2019. The first of its kind in California in over 50 years. The jury ruled unanimously that the Hart parents had intentionally killed their children by driving off the cliff. Number 3. Lacey Spears. Lacey Spears built an identity online as a devoted, struggling single mom. She shared constant updates about her young son Garnett, who she claimed suffered from chronic health issues. Her blogs, Facebook posts, and photos painted her as a mother doing everything she could to care for a sick little boy. She received sympathy, support, and admiration from her followers. But behind that carefully crafted image was a horrifying truth. Lacey wasn't just documenting Garnett's illness, she was causing it. Garnett Spears was born in December 2008. Soon after, Lacey claimed he suffered from multiple health problems, ear infections, feeding difficulties, and other mysterious issues. By age 5, Garnett had already been hospitalized over 20 times. He had feeding tube inserted, and Lacey regularly updated social media about his supposed battles. But in January 2014, things took a tragic turn. Lacey brought Garnett to a hospital in New York, claiming he had seizures. Doctors were alarmed when his sodium levels spiked to dangerous levels. He was soon transferred to Westchester Medical Center. Despite emergency care, Garnett's condition worsened. His brain began to swell, and after several days in ICU, he died. What puzzled doctors was that there were no medical explanation for his extreme sodium levels. They began to suspect poisoning. And when investigators tested the feeding bags Lacey had brought from home, they found deadly amounts of salt, some containing enough sodium to kill an adult. After Garnett's death, police launched a full investigation. What they uncovered was chilling. Surveillance footage from the hospital showed Lacey taking Garnett into a private bathroom with his feeding tube just before his symptoms worsened. Investigators also discovered she had searched online for information about sodium poisoning in children. When they analyzed the feeding bag from her apartment, they found residue that proved she had been adding massive amounts of salt. Lacey had kept up the image of a caring mother while secretly poisoning her son to gain sympathy and online attention. In June 2014, she was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter. She pleaded not guilty. Lacey's trial began in early 2015. Prosecutors laid out a disturbing picture. A mother suffering from a psychological condition known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy, someone who harms a child to gain attention for themselves.
They showed evidence of the toxic salt levels, the manipulated feeding tubes, and Lacey's consistent presence during Garnett's unexplained medical episodes. Witnesses testified that Garnett had been a happy, energetic boy when he wasn't in the hospital, and doctors had long struggled to explain why his condition would suddenly deteriorate. The timeline of his health crashes always seemed to line up with Lacey's presence and actions. Her defense team argued that she was a loving mother dealing with a very ill child, but the evidence was overwhelming. Prosecutors said Lacey had slowly and intentionally poisoned her own son, all while pretending to fight for his survival. In March 2015, the jury found Lacey Spears guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Today, Lacey is serving her sentence in New York. Number 4. Christy Sheets. Christy Sheets was a mother who, to most people, seemed like a loving and devoted parent. She posted photos of her daughters often, proudly describing how much they meant to her. On the outside, the Sheets family looked like any other suburban household in Falls Sierra, Texas. But underneath, there were deep cracks forming. Christy had been struggling with her mental health for years. Multiple attempts, hospitalization, and a marriage that was unraveling. Her relationship with her husband, Jason, had grown increasingly tense, and her daughters, Taylor, 22, and Madison, 17, were caught in the middle. What happened on June 24, 2016, would leave a community in shock and a father with a grief that could never be healed. That day, Christy called a family meeting in the living room of their home. Jason assumed it was going to be another attempt to resolve issues between them, possibly about the divorce they'd been discussing. But instead, Christy pulled out a .38 caliber revolver and aimed it at their daughters. She shot Madison first. Taylor and Madison both ran out of the house screaming, trying to escape, but Christy chased them. Madison collapsed in the street after being hit again. Taylor tried to run further but was shot and fell just beyond the driveway. Christy went back into the house to reload her gun. Then she returned outside, stood over her daughters, and fired again. Neighbors heard the screams and gunshots, some watching in horror as the events unfolded. Jason had run out of the front door begging Christy to stop, but she ignored him. When police arrived within minutes, they ordered Christy to drop her weapon. She refused. Officers fired a single shot, killing her on the scene. There was no arrest. Christy died before she could be taken into custody. But investigators quickly began piecing together what led up to the murders. Jason told police that his wife had battled serious mental health problems for years. She had attempted suicide 3 times since 2012 and had been hospitalized for depression. According to Jason, Christy became emotionally unstable after the deaths of her grandfather and her mother, and her behavior became more unpredictable over time. Police confirmed that they had responded to the Sheets household multiple times over the years, both for medical emergencies and domestic issues. They described her as emotionally disturbed, with incidents of threatening behavior that concerned them. Still, she had access to a firearm when she ultimately used it on her own children. The investigation revealed more about Christy's motives. According to Jason, the murders were not spontaneous. He believed she planned to kill their daughters as a way to punish him. She knew how much he loved them. Investigators agreed with that theory. In their findings, they stated that Christy waited until everyone was gathered in the home, created a scenario where escape would be difficult, and carried out the attack in front of her husband. In chilling detail, Jason also told police that Christy had even told him just weeks earlier, "You'll get what's coming to you." On the day of the killing, Christy had posted on social media about the importance of protecting family with firearms, just hours before turning one on her own daughters. Because Christy was killed on the scene, there was no trial or sentencing, but the aftermath was devastating. Jason lost his entire family in the matter of minutes. He told investigators he felt like his life had ended too. In interviews, he shared that Taylor was set to be married that very weekend, and Madison had her whole future ahead of her. Number 5. Andrea Yates. Andrea Yates was once seen as a quiet, devoted mother living in a modest Houston, Texas home with her husband and 5 young children. From the outside, their life looked like any other large family trying to make ends meet. But behind closed doors, Andrea was in a mental and emotional battle that had been building for years. A former nurse and dedicated stay-at-home mom, she struggled silently with severe postpartum depression and psychosis. Her decline was gradual, marked by disturbing warning signs that were noticed but never fully addressed in time. What happened in June 2001 would become one of the most tragic and unforgettable cases in American criminal history. On the morning of June 20th, 2001, Andrea waited for her husband, Russell Rusty Yates, to leave for work. She then filled the bathtub and one by one drowned all 5 of her children: Noah 7, John 5, Paul 3, Luke 2, and Mary just 6 months old. After killing them, she calmly called 911 and then phoned her husband to confess what she had done. When police arrived at the scene, they found the bodies of 4 of the children lined up in a bed, with the youngest, Mary, still in the water. Andrea admitted everything without hesitation. Her actions were horrifying, and the details shocked the entire country. But as investigators looked deeper into her life, it became clear that Andrea's mental health had been deteriorating for years, and the system had failed to stop her from reaching this unimaginable breaking point. Andrea was arrested immediately and charged with capital murder. In her confession, she told police she believed she was saving her children from eternal damnation. She claimed the devil was inside her and that by killing them, she was protecting them from going to hell. It wasn't the first time she'd had thoughts like these. Over the years, Andrea had been in and out of psychiatric treatment. She had been diagnosed with postpartum depression and psychosis following the birth of her 4th child, and had even attempted suicide twice. At one point, she had been hospitalized for trying to overdose and for self-harm. Doctors had warned Rusty that another pregnancy could worsen her condition, but the couple went on to have a 5th child. Andrea had recently stopped taking her medication before the murders, and her mental state had rapidly declined in the weeks leading up to that day. Her trial began in 2002 and was one of the most widely watched cases in its time. The defense argued that Andrea was legally insane and not responsible for her actions. They brought in expert witnesses who testified that she was suffering from a severe psychotic break at the time of the killings. The prosecution, on the other hand, maintained that Andrea knew what she was doing at that time and that her actions were calculated. They pointed out that she waited for her husband to leave and locked the dog away so it wouldn't interfere. Ultimately, the jury sided with the prosecution. Andrea Yates was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 40 years. But that wasn't the end of the legal story. In 2006, after new revelations came to light, including false testimony from a prosecution expert, the convictions were overturned. In a second trial, Andrea was found not guilty by reason of insanity. She was committed to Kerrville State Hospital, a high-security mental health facility in Texas, where she remains to this day. Number 6. Lori Vallow DeBell. Lori Vallow DeBell, often called the Doomsday Mom, was at the center of a shocking case that gripped the nation. Once a mother of several children, Lori's life took a dark turn when she became involved with an apocalyptic religious belief that would lead to the death of her 2 youngest children and others close to her. The crime began with the mysterious disappearance of Lori's children, Tylee Ryan and Joshua J.J. Vallow, in 2019. For months, the children were missing, and their whereabouts were unknown. During that time, Lori had remarried Chad Daybell, a man known for his doomsday survival writings and beliefs. It was later revealed that Lori and Chad believed they were destined for an apocalyptic event and saw their victims as obstacles or zombies to be eliminated. In 2020, the remains of Tylee and JT were discovered buried on Chad Daybell's property in Idaho, shocking investigators and the public alike. The death of these two children marked the centerpiece of a bizarre and disturbing case that extended beyond just the missing kids. Lori was also implicated in the death of her estranged husband, Charles Vallow, and her niece's ex-husband, Brandon Bordeaux, both murdered under suspicious circumstances linked to her. Additionally, Tammy DeBell, Chad's former wife, was found dead, and her death was ruled suspicious in connection with the couple's strange beliefs and motives. After an extensive investigation, Lori Vallow was arrested in early 2020 in Hawaii, where she had been living with Chad Daybell. Authorities charged her with multiple counts of murder and conspiracy, focusing especially on the death of her children and other victims. Lori's arrest came after law enforcement pieced together financial motives, including a $1 million life insurance policy and her escalating behavior tied to apocalyptic cult-like thinking. The arrest was complicated by Lori's refusal to cooperate and her firm belief that divine intervention would protect her. During her trial, Lori represented herself despite having no legal training, a decision that surprised many. She vehemently denied all charges, claiming religious visions and that she was innocent of any wrongdoing. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence, including forensic proof from the burial site, financial records, and witness testimonies. They argued that Lori and Chad used their doomsday belief to rationalize the murder and eliminate those they saw as threats to their new life together. The trial lasted several months, revealing disturbing details about the couple's mindset and the manipulation of those around them. On July 25, 2025, Lori Vallow DeBell was found guilty of multiple counts of murder and conspiracy in Arizona, receiving 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. She's also serving life sentences in Idaho for the death of her children and Tammy DeBell.